Harp's House. In your eardrum. Man, wherever you want me to be.
You're now listening
to Harp's House. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, along with my trusty confidant, boxing and UFC expert, actually an MMA expert, Stan Tucker. How you doing tonight, Stan?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I can't complain. So the two topics we're going to tackle tonight are the Jose Aldo fight and the Conor McGregor / Floyd Mayweather fight if it actually happens. But we'll start tonight here on Harp's House with the UFC Featherweight champion Jose Aldo. Now, he recently opened up as a slight betting favorite for his fight against interim title holder Max Holloway. That fight's going to take place on June 3rd in Brazil. And again, that's UFC 212. Now, Aldo is currently 22-6, and he opened up as a slight favorite. Holloway goes into the fight. Shout out to Max Holloway. I met him in Houston a few weeks ago at the Super Bowl. He opens this fight. He comes into this at 17-3, and he's coming off a pretty decisive victory over the last couple months when he knocked out Anthony Pettis. So what do you think going into this fight about Aldo being the betting favorite?
I'm about as surprised that he's the betting favorite in this one as I was surprised that he was not the betting favorite against Conor McGregor. And as much as I truly believe that Jose Aldo or some would say Jose, is a Hall of Famer. I think that he's the best that his division has ever had, and I think just like all fighters, it gets to a point where you've hit your apex for so long, and it's only downhill from there. I think that Max Holloway is just in the sweet spot of his career, where he's just broken off a string of wins. I believe he's on a 10-fight win streak, which is not easy to do in the UFC, and he, quite frankly, is just a lot more active than Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo fought that one time in 2015 against Conor McGregor in December, and he had a 13-month layoff prior to that after beating Chad Mendes, and since losing to McGregor, he's fought once over the past year, and that was against Frankie Edgar in July. So even as this fight comes around, he's going to almost have another full year of inactivity, whereas Max Holloway has fought four times in 2015, and he fought twice in 2016. The last, as you said, being his TKO destruction over Anthony Pettis in December. So I think that youth, along with way more activity, are two of the main reasons why I would give him the advantage of in this fight over Jose Aldo.
Gotcha. And like you said, Jose is 30 years old, and he's opened as a betting favorite in each of his last 10 UFC fights, except for one, like you said, in 2015 in his title defense against Conor McGregor, which that fight only lasted 13 seconds. So I'm sure Jose, and as well as his camp and his supporters want to see at least more than 13 seconds in this fight. So do you think that Jose is going to have the same type of success that he's had in all of the fights leading up to the Conor fight, and then even after the Conor fight with the Frankie Edgar destruction? Or do you think Pettit's going to have his way?
Well, I think that Aldo has developed his game and his game has somewhat evolved from when he was just a freakish athlete. I saw him knock out, it wasn't the fight against Cub Swanson. I believe it was the fight against Charles Oliveira. And so after knocking him out, he ran up on the, when people go to sit alongside, kind of straddling the edge of the cage, pumping their fists to the crowd. Well, when Jose Aldo knocked out, Charles Oliveira,
right,
he ran up, jumped to where he's standing on the very top cushion of the cage, and then lands a backflip, he looked like he was jumping off of a diving board into a swimming pool, and he did that off of the very top of that cage, landing in the mat. That is not the Jose Aldo that we're seeing today. It's a lot more measured of a fighter, fights at a much more measured pace. He's not just throwing vicious knees halfway from halfway across the cage. He's a lot more, leg kick, jab, move, jab, leg kick. So Whereas I think Max Holloway, because of where he is in his career,
Right.
still has a little more pep in his step. To where I think that if somebody can push a pace that the other cannot handle, I still think that at this moment would be Max Holloway over Jose Aldo.
Gotcha. Like you said, I just don't know how Max Holloway will deal with those leg kicks from Jose because, like you said, that's become his calling card later in his career, and it'll be interesting to see how Max does if they get into the later rounds. So, do you see this fight ending early, or going deep into the fifth, or even going the full 5 rounds?
I think that it's going to be a close decision. I think it's going the full 5 rounds, and I think that another question that this one will answer is Max Holloway that good, or is Anthony Pettis somewhat a shot fighter?
Right, right. That's true. That's true. Because, like you said, so I can't remember. Did he came down for this fight? Right? He came down in weight, or yeah? Because he's been the title holder at another weight class, correct? And then he came down for this fight. Is that how it
Yeah,
worked? Yeah, yeah.
He had won the interim UFC Featherweight Championship by default, actually, not even through the win, but because Pettis had missed weight, so he technically won it right before the fight. So now he is fighting for Jose Aldo's featherweight bout. So this is actually the same weight class, or is going to be at the same weight class where Jose Aldo's been operating for the past several years.
Gotcha, gotcha. And Pettis wasn't Pettis a title holder in another division before this last defeat that he had?
Yeah, Pettis at one point, if you were to ask me, he was a top 5 pound for pound fighter in the entire sport. I would have even put him as high as maybe 3 or 4 for a point in time. This was around the time that he did the off the cage kick against Benson Henderson, and he beat Donald Cerrone terribly, where they looked like they didn't even belong in the same league. He was moving at a different speed, moving in and out so fast, and he was just another freak athlete who had a very, very dynamic striking game and was a better boxer than most people he was fighting. He spent most of his time at lightweight. So,
Right.
yeah, so since... Which is weird because usually people will go
Up.
up in weight as
Right,
they
but he
go
came
older.
down. Exactly.
Yeah, which I felt was kind of fascinating, and without implicating, a lot of people would grow suspicious because that's not the body's natural way of handling itself, regulating itself. So whereas some people, for instance, Rumble Johnson was fighting at one point at welterweight. I mean, he was choked out by Josh Koscheck of all people. That is the same Rumble Johnson who's now beasting and taking on former heavyweights like Daniel Cormier.
Right.
So the body, if anything, usually sees an explosion of weight, not a reduction in weight. So I don't know if that played into the lethargy, and sluggishness that we've seen over the past couple fights with Pettis. Or again, I don't know. Maybe Max Holloway's just that good to where he's moving in and out faster than people can react to his punches, even if he's taking the lead. Usually, somebody will counterpunch when somebody gets over anxious footwork wise. But it seems like, whereas Frankie Edgar, when he was in his prime, he was able to hop in and out of the pocket, throw his shots, and hop out of harm's way before return fire came.
Right.
And it looks like Holloway has some of those same attributes. And it's going to be interesting to see if Jose can either match that or do something to neutralize that.
Right. All right. So if you got to pick one, who you picking?
It might sound a bit foolish. It might sound contradictory. But even though I might have just given 5 reasons why Max Holloway should win, I'm still going to go.
One more time.
Jose Aldo.
So one more time. You broke up a little bit. What was that?
I'm sorry. Even though I might have just dropped 5 reasons why Max Holloway should win that, I'm actually going to go with Jose Aldo on this because of experience. Because he has he's been in situations where he had to gut out a 5-round decision. I think he knows what he needs to do to win on the judges' scorecards, and I think that he could stay just active enough where he's landing a higher percentage of his shots than Holloway, and I think that he's going to find a way to neutralize the youth and the energy of Max Holloway, which I think is Holloway's biggest advantage. So I'm going to go with Jose Aldo, 3 rounds to 2.
I think I'm gonna go with Holloway only because he's younger. He's a little bit more. He's hungrier. He wants to be the undisputed champion, and I just don't think Jose really has that dog in him because he really. I feel like he's fighting people, but he really just wants to get his rematch against Conor. But they're just putting other people in front of him to take that place. So I just think those few reasons will lead to, like I said, will lead to a new champion and a new, I guess you would say, a new king in that weight class. I'm going to go with Max Holloway. But we're going to take a break and we're going to come back with this new development of Mayweather and Conor as the feud continues. So we'll be right back here on Harp's House. Thanks everybody for sticking around. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, and I'm here with my good friend, boxing and MMA expert, Stan Tucker. Now we're going to pick it right back up with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. Now these two have been battling it out with a war of quotes over the last couple weeks. And Mayweather was recently quoted as saying this: "For Conor McGregor, I'm coming out of retirement just to fight Conor McGregor." He then went on to say, now he was in Liverpool, England when he said this. He said, "I don't want to hear any more excuses about the money or about the UFC. Sign the papers with the UFC so you can fight me in June. Simple and plain. Let's fight in June." What are your thoughts?
I thought that it was a very easy statement for Floyd to make because I think he knows, like everybody in the know seems to know, is that there are a lot of hurdles that still need to be cleared for that fight to happen. So I kind of looked at it as just the next chapter in the in selling wolf tickets. To be honest, I thought that it was a pretty safe statement, interesting statement, exciting statement for everybody who wants to see Floyd in the ring again. But I don't think that it has any legs to it, that it brings us any closer to the reality of that fight actually taking place.
Really? So you don't think that, I guess you would say that gives us a tip that, hey, it is really going to happen and we're really close to it?
I don't think that is necessarily the tipping point. The thing is, I think that there's so much money to be made in that situation that what I think we're just going through are the processes to ensure that all the pockets that need to be lined up are lined up. So I do think that it's going to happen. I just don't think that Floyd's statement was any sort of a pivotal milestone of sorts. I think that it's always been a question of when, not if, because this is the only time in I think both of the sports history, with the exception of maybe Anderson Silva versus Roy Jones, but that was kind of wacky. Roy Jones had already fallen far off the cliff in terms of his career. But I think that this is just a unique situation to where it just works so well because there's such a high demand for both fighters that it has to happen if there is any, truth to the statement that, money is, money is the engine that's running this whole ship.
Right. So do you think that, like Floyd said, the only way he's coming out of retirement would be to fight Conor? Do you think there's any truth that he really doesn't think it's ever going to happen? Because in order for Floyd to fight, it would mean that Dana White would have to basically agree to terms with Floyd's terms. Because Floyd has said on numerous occasions he's going to take the majority of the split, and he'd only be willing to give Conor maybe like $40 million, while he'd take $100 million. And Conor has so much pride, and so does the UFC. I don't think they'll be willing to take a split like that. So I think that's one of those things that Floyd knows will never happen, so he's just willing to sit on it, and because he knows it won't happen. What do you think about that?
I think that, with Floyd, I mean, he's been playing the chess game for a while, and he knows the leverage that he's carrying into this particular situation. Dana White is going to also say all of the right things to make it seem that he's not the party that's blocking this fight. Conor's going to say all the right things to make sure that nobody gets the impression that he's the one blocking this fight. And I would expect nothing less than for Floyd to do the same thing. I think that what is being lost in the situation, at least when it's being discussed, through the public, is that when Conor fought, when McGregor fought Jose Aldo, he made $500,000. When he fought Nate Diaz for UFC 202, he made about $3 to $5 million.
Right.
And five would be on the high side.
Right.
So when we throw numbers like, he's only getting 30 to 40 million, I don't think that Floyd is going to be willing to give him that much money, because I think that Floyd also is trying to keep in perspective what he's accustomed to making to what he's expecting or demanding for this opportunity, whereas what Floyd would be making would more or less be in line with what he has made in his biggest fight, maybe close to in the ballpark of what he made versus Manny Pacquiao, maybe Canelo Alvarez, not so much Andre Berto, not so much Robert Guerrero. With Dana, and that's kind of the wild card. What the relationship is between the UFC and this fight. Are
Right.
they stakeholders in the fight? Are they investors in the fight? Are they co-promoters in the fight? Or are they just another pocket that just needs to be properly broken off to give the blessing and to issue the green light for this to happen and for Conor to be able to do this? I still think that the fight's going to happen. It's interesting because if I'm the UFC, I'm fighting tooth and nail to make sure that this doesn't happen, because one payday getting broken off the chunk of those earnings, I don't think it's worth the credibility and the lifeblood and the longevity of the sport.
That's the thing. Like, the UFC is they're searching for stars, and they're for sure searching for American stars. And obviously, there's no real, I guess you would say, American superstars that are the equivalent of Conor McGregor. So that's the thing. Like, I don't know where do they go from here. If Conor goes to the boxing ring and just gets crushed and destroyed, where does he go? Or if he goes there and he's successful, how do you go from, like you said, if we're throwing out a number like 30 to 40 million, how do you go from, all right, you got 40 million in this fight, now come on back to the UFC and we'll give you $3 to $4 million? He's going to be like, no, I want way more money. I mean, anybody in their right mind would say, I just made, this astronomical amount compared to what you were paying me. We need to renegotiate this deal. So I feel like this could cause more long-term damage, possibly to the future contracts for Conor and the UFC going forth. Because, if you think back, he's played chicken with retirement. He's tweeted out he's retired. He's said he's done. So long, suckers, F, Y, and Z. So it'll be interesting to see, like you said, if this fight goes down, how much he gets paid, and just how much the UFC gets paid. Because, like you said, Conor, he's not his own boss, or is he his own boss? Like, is Dana still considered his boss? Because we know that Mayweather calls his own shots. So it'll be interesting to see that dynamic about how, like you said, how the UFC gets paid, how Dana gets paid, what Conor gets, versus we know what Floyd's going to get.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. I think Conor is at the stage of his life/career that, yes, he does have a lot of pride. Yes, he does want to be respected as being able to fight and at the highest levels and to be able to be the master of his craft. But with athletes and with fighters in particular, the window of your peak earning potential is so short, and so many talents are not able to capitalize on that small window of time to really cash in on that peak earning potential. They either pick the wrong fight and lose it and mess up their earning potential, or they have some sort of a stalemate with the promotional outfit, and they can't agree on terms. So they basically place the fighter on ice during the peak of his career. Conor's at a place where one loss, I mean, that's Ronda, right?
Right.
Things could change. Things could change on the drop of a dime, and Conor could go from being able to be worth, this at this magnitude, to being somebody who will be struggling to make $1 million per fight. Anderson Silva never had the type of earning potential, or just the earning reality that Conor has. But look how steep that cliff was.
Right.
So it happens to them all, and I think Conor's not a super young guy,
Yeah, no,
pretty young, but he's not.
he was fighting a while before he came to the UFC. Like you said, he's not some 21-year-old kid who just sprout up out of nowhere. That's definitely not the case.
Yeah, so if you have to have a trade off between gutting it out in these brutal fights versus who knows Khabib, Tony Ferguson, Jose Aldo, I mean take your pick, or to make what you would make in 10 fights in one fight,
Exactly.
What would you do?
That's what I'm saying. If I was Conor, I'm taking the 40 million. I'll give Floyd his 100 or whatever he wants. But like you said, if you're going to offer me 40 million and the most I've ever made in a fight is 4 million, like you said, I'm taking my 10 fights in one, and I might take my L on the chin with Mayweather because I know he's not going to knock me out. He's going to probably point me to death or just duck and dodge me. So I'm taking that payday and I'm just going to like take that money home and everything is going to be good. But like you said, with these fighters, it's something about pride. So I think that Conor really thinks he deserves half, which is crazy because if you look at it on straight economics, like there's nothing that would tell you he deserves half based on his fight history and Mayweather's fight history. But again, a man's pride may be the detriment in his downfall because, like you said, he can miss the biggest payday of his life based on pride.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Comparatively, he stands to lose the least in this situation. And here's what I mean by that. I think that there is a near 0% chance that he wins in a boxing fight with Floyd.
And nobody expects him to. Nobody who understands boxing expects him to win that fight.
Yeah, and just imagine what that does to Floyd's legacy if he loses, just
Right.
somehow, some way, right? That would just be that nobody would expect that outcome. And Conor is the new king of the world, and Floyd's whole 20-year professional career has pretty much culminated into that happening in arguably the biggest moment of his career, aside from maybe Manny Pacquiao, but. Conor stands to lose very little comparatively, but I just don't see if this fight, or like I said, when this fight takes place, I don't see him having much of an appetite to get back into the cage for a fraction of that. And I mean, and even if he does, will he really commit himself or recommit himself to the training regimens, to everything that it requires to preparing yourself for those fights? For, again, a fraction of what he's going to get for this, if you will, circus show of a fight.
Exactly. So, yeah, I don't even know why Floyd is even entertaining this or is why he's even considering this fight. I get the money, but at a certain point, it's like, man, do you want to tarnish your entire legacy by, like you said, risking getting knocked out by somebody who's not even technically like a boxer? But I guess the payday comes down and kind of changes everything. Like they say, money rules and runs everything. So I guess he'd take that L for $100 more million.
Yeah, you know, you said money rules everything, and I think in the case of Floyd, pride is a close second. So money might determine the choice that he makes. But I think that it's also anchored in pride because he hasn't fought in over a year. He's well into retirement. He's about 40 years old. So why are you going to put any sort of a possibility on the table and allow this guy, who at least we know has power, give him the opportunity to really put hands on you in the ring
and ruin your legacy? Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it just comes down to why not just make this one last money grab and peace out, because I think that Floyd thinks that there is a 0% chance of him losing the fight.
Right. And like you said, if Floyd really thought that Conor would knock him out, I don't even think this would be a possibility to Floyd. He would completely avoid it and just scoff at the idea of him getting in the ring with an MMA fighter. So like you said, I think he's seen Conor fight and he's seen Conor hands. And I don't think he thinks Conor has a shot in hell of beating him, so that's why he's entertaining this prospect, just for the money, because he knows he can't knock him out. Because Floyd, like you said, is well calculated.
Oh, yeah, and you know what? But I don't think that beating Conor is enough to even preserve Floyd's legacy. I mean, his legacy is his legacy, but I'm saying if you want to talk about, did he finish it with an exclamation point, or did he just finish it with a weak whimper? He has to stop Conor. I don't think he can just win on the cards. I think he has to finish Conor. Just like Randy Couture, when James Toney got in the octagon, Randy Couture had to stop James Toney because that was a boxer playing a totally different sport. Floyd has, Ray Mercer, when he fought former UFC heavyweight champion Tim Sylvia in a boxing fight, James Mercer within the first 10 seconds of the fight knocked Tim Sylvia out cold. And so that was just what he had to do because that was the sport that they were playing. So Floyd has to knock Conor out. Has to stop him. The referee has to jump in once Conor, and Conor has to be beaten up on the ropes and unable to continue. It has to result in that for it to make sense from a legacy standpoint. Again, money is a totally isolated situation, but to preserve the legacy, he has to stop Conor. Winning a 12-round decision just does not cut it in that case.
I gotcha. Well, all right, so it's March 15th. You say the fight is going to happen or it's not going to happen?
I think it will happen.
Do you think it will happen? Do you think it's going to happen in June? Because Mayweather and the money team said, quote, let's fight in June. What you think, June or nah?
I do not think it's going to happen in June.
Gotcha. Well, we'll see. We'll keep you guys updated. Again, I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, along with my co-hosts for all my boxing and UFC news. That's Stan Tucker. If you want to follow us on Instagram, that's I am Harper, IamHarper. And again, you're listening to Harp's House. That's in your iTunes store. And if you have a Droid, that's also in your Google Play Store. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube. That's Harp's House. Stan, go ahead and give them some of your social media handles so they can follow you as well with all your tips and other things you got going on.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you. On Instagram, you can follow us on Seen and Heard TV. That's SCENEANDHEARD TV. On Facebook, we are Seen and Heard TV as well. And we have a YouTube channel, and it's youtube.com/Seen and Heard Now. So SCENEANDHEARDNOW, and that's on YouTube.
Sounds good. Thanks again, and thanks again, everybody, for listening to Harp's House. Again, I'm your host, and we'll be back when there's something else to talk about. Take care.